Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Danaher. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the New York Attorney General's Office. And we're out here speaking various consumer-related issues at Cornell Cooperative Extension in Ithaca. And encourage anyone out there who wants to join us that we're here typically the second Thursday of the month, talking about a whole host of different topics. You can direct your attention to Cornell Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County's website, and it has a list of all the different topics that we talk about throughout the year. And today's topic is charitable giving, how to be a good consumer when it comes to giving away your charitable dollars. We're fast approaching the holiday season. Hard to imagine, but that's happening. And nothing warms our hearts more than knowing that we have been able to contribute to make someone's life a little bit easier, especially around this time of year. Whether it's contributing money for a food bank or food for a food bank, or buying presents for children at the holiday time, getting a new outfit for someone who can't afford it to go to church, or to help out at a holiday dinner or Thanksgiving dinner. We want to help people, and that's kind of our nature. In fact, in New York, we're one of the highest rated states for charitable giving. We give billions of dollars each year for charitable causes, and we hope to help those who aren't as fortunate as us. And we do that in various ways. We can do it by actually giving money, but we give of our time, we give of our talents, in addition to giving our treasure or our money. We've always been encouraged to do that, although there have been recent income tax changes that has some effect on it. We were encouraged at one point in time, and still to a little bit of an extent, to give money or property or things, and we always obtained a tax deduction that we could take out for charitable giving. Somewhat muted a little bit now because of the relatively recent tax changes that have occurred, and the level to which we have to give and have other expenses limits the amount that we can actually deduct. I haven't seen anything, reports of whether or not that has impacted charitable giving. I hope that those of us out there that are still interested and desire to give to make other people's lives better, and not just do it because we got a tax deduction. If we don't get the tax deduction any further, why we won't do it. I hope we will still continue to do that. Our office, the Attorney General's office, also encourages charitable giving. We do also, though, recognize that there can be scams related to charitable giving. So we want to encourage all of you who are making charitable contributions that you make sure that you take the steps that are necessary in order to ensure that your charitable dollars are being used for the purpose for which you've intended. Charities do legitimately use their funds for things that are tangential to the charitable purpose. For example, most legitimate charities out there, that, especially the bigger ones that have a large infrastructure, have expenses associated with them that some of our charitable dollars are used to help the charity to continue its mission, to carry on. It's not, if you make a contribution for a particular charity that feeds the hungry, it may be that some of your dollars have to be used for warehousing expenses, for the cost of administration expenses, salaries, and other things associated with the charity that allows them to bring in the number of people that they need to carry on the mission. It isn't all necessarily buying food that is stocked on the shelf, although we hope that a large percentage and a reasonable percentage of that is used for that purpose. I can kind of segue away from this to just talk to the charitable organizations themselves, to have them understand that the law in New York provides that anyone, large or small, that is engaged in holding or raising charitable funds in New York, that they must be registered with the New York State Attorney General's office. It's a very simple process. It's now an entirely online process where you can just go to the website and enter in the necessary information to become registered. That website is charitiesnys.com. www.charitiesnys.com. You can go, that's the main Charities Bureau website for our office. You can go onto that site. It has a whole host of information. All the guides and publications that our office issues, including registration of charitable organizations, and for those charities that hold $25,000 or more in assets or raise $25,000 or more annually, they're required to make annual financial filings. On the lower end, it's just, if it's under $25,000, it's just an exemption affidavit they have to sign. Say, we're exempt from having to file because we don't have enough. Or if it's above that amount, filing whatever the required forms are. Larger organizations are required to actually file an accountant's report or audited financial statements, depending on the amount. And then that gets filed annually. So for the charitable organizations out there, make sure that you get registered and make sure that you're up to date with your annual financial filings. Because the next thing we'll talk about is going back to the people who are making charitable gifts, is that there are ways that we as charitable givers can check into the organizations that we are dealing with, or organizations that have solicited us for contributions. One of the things that we can do in being a good consumer in making charitable gifts is to check on the Attorney General's website, charitiesnys.com. And on the main page, there's actually over along the right-hand side, there is actually a charity lookup. You can plug in the name of the charity and see if, one, they're registered with our office, and two, if they filed their annual financial reports. And three, you can actually go and look at their financial reports to see how much money they've raised, how much money they've used, what they've used it for, whether it's gone to that mission or not, how much of the money that they've contributed go toward administrative costs as compared to the charitable mission. On top of that, those charities that are running fundraising campaigns through third-party fundraisers, the charity has to be registered, the fundraiser has to be registered, and they have to make financial reports on those charitable fundraising campaigns. Our office produces yearly a report on those fundraising campaigns, and that report is called Pennies for Charity. And it accumulates all the third-party fundraising campaigns that have been engaged in, and the annual report shows how much goes toward the charitable purpose, how much goes toward fundraising expenses. I know historically, and looking over the years of different pennies for charities reports that have come out, that those using third-party fundraisers, approximately 60 to 67% to 2/3 of the fundraising monies go toward fundraising expenses and capital administrative costs, and only 1/3 go toward the charitable mission for which it was intended. And we only report that to show people the information. Now, we as consumer givers have to take that information and then make a decision. Do I make a contribution to this campaign, or do I not make this a contribution to that campaign? So it's really just to show you what's out there, and that then we and you as a good consumer will look and make your determination whether or not do I contribute this or do I not. Understanding, of course, that charities do have legitimate overhead expenses that they need to use funds for in order to continue to make them, to fulfill their mission. So it's incumbent upon us to then investigate that and say, is this something that I want to contribute to? Charitable area is one of the areas that is very ripe for scam artists. It's one of the #1 areas that scam artists take money from us, because they go to we unsuspecting people asking for money and telling us it's going to be used for this great cause that we all would want to contribute to. And then all of a sudden, after we contribute the money, that doesn't get used for that particular purpose. The solicitations for funds comes in many different ways. It comes over the mail. We get things in mail to make contributions. We get telephone calls. We get a lot of telephone calls for charitable purposes. Some people would think, well, I shouldn't be getting these telephone calls because I'm on the do not call list. There are certain exceptions to the do not call list. And the do not call list is if you're on the list, you're not supposed to be receiving solicitation calls. Well, one of the exceptions to the do not call list are charitable solicitations. So they're really not bound by the do not call list. Although I would encourage people who receive calls that they don't want and they're from a charity, tell the person who's calling, please take my name off your list. That may or may not work, but at least for the legitimate charities, they really do not want to be calling people who are not going to contribute. That's wasting their time and energy to contact you, and many will take you off the list. Now, you may end up back on the list at some point in time, but at least you can let them know that you do not want to be called. There's also personal contact, from as simple as somebody you know who hits you up to buy tickets for a fundraiser for your church or something else, to those who may go door to door asking for contributions. And I know all of us have seen outside those retail establishments where you come out after you go into the store, and there's the kids that are there raising money for the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts troops or for some other purpose. So it can happen in many different ways. How are they funds raised? Well, sometimes it's a fundraiser where you buy tickets to send somebody to a show. I know that I've received solicitations where you get a coupon to go to a local restaurant, and everybody that goes on a particular night, 10% of the proceeds from those dinners that people bought are going to be donated to a specific charity. There's raffles out there. And let me stop there with the raffles. In New York, the only entities that can raise money with raffles are charitable organizations. So if you are seeing some other type of raffle that is more for a for-profit entity, it is not allowed in New York. It can only be for charitable purposes. People also raise funds through direct contributions. I know I've participated in many golf tournaments that have been fundraisers for different charities, and we all encourage people to do those sorts of things. I know that I've given my time, a lot of time, to different charitable causes and things, and we also encourage people to do that. In some instances, though, we don't know who we are dealing with when it comes to charitable contributions. I'll bring us into the modern time where there is a significant amount of money that is being raised through these things that are known as crowdfunding sources. There are many online charitable solicitation raises that are going on out there. That somebody goes on to one site I'll just use as a GoFundMe. GoFundMe is a charitable source, a source where you can go and set up a fundraising campaign to raise money for particular purposes. I know of one in particular that tragically a family that we know and a boy that we know, I call him a boy because I'm an old man, but a young man who I've known the family since they were little kids, was actually with some friends on a bachelor's party. But you know, he went to the Eastern Shore with some buddies of his, and that they were, you know, get together for the weekend and celebrate his upcoming wedding. And he was, they were at the beach and everything was great, and they're all having a blast. And I don't know the particular circumstances, but he either dove into a wave or got caught up in a wave or something and ended up being seriously injured. And so there have been fundraising campaigns over, one of them is GoFundMe, that the family started a GoFundMe campaign because he's looking at long-term rehabilitation and medical expenses ongoing for probably the rest of his life. And there's some other fundraisers coming up that we'll participate in that we've my family has contributed to. The one caution that I give to people when they are going to consider making a charitable contribution is to know who you're making the contribution to. I know that we all want to help, and I know that a lot of these campaigns tug at our heartstrings, but make sure you know who you are dealing with. In the case of these crowdfunding sources, make sure you know who it is that is actually running the campaign, and make sure you know that you can trust them, that the funds that you are donating are going to be used for that particular purpose. Where we get in trouble is where we start making these contributions and we don't know who's running it. Because I'll tell you what happens. What happens is the crowdfunding, the online crowdfunding organization, entity, is just an accumulator of funds. They take in money. Now they may use a certain percentage of the contribution for their expenses. Keeping the website up, having an infrastructure there. In the more reputable ones, they have they do checking to make sure that the people are who they say they are, that are doing the fundraising and that sort of thing. You should also check yourselves, by the way. But they have an infrastructure there. So a certain percentage, which is usually disclosed and should be disclosed if a certain percentage is being used, they may have something attached to it to say, will you contribute an extra $1 or something to keep this crowdfunding source going, and that you say, yeah, I want to do that to make sure. well, that's fine as long as it's disclosed and that you understand it. So know that's out there. But more importantly, know who it is that the contributions are being made to. And I will use an example. I had a case not too long ago where someone used a crowdfunding source to raise funds for another tragic situation where a young man who was within weeks of graduating from college was injured, was actually killed as a result of some stuff that he got involved in. Good guy, I call him a good kid, you know, because I'm older again. But a good guy, and it was just tragic to the family, just terrible. Really great family. And it turns out that someone that the father of the boy, the young man, the father of the young man worked with someone, and that person went out and started a crowdfunding fundraise for the family. And what the family was doing is that the family started a charity in the name of their deceased son, and they used the proceeds of that charity to help fund scholarships for kids going off to college who may not be the star student, may not be the star athlete, may not be the star musician or anything. Just they want to help somebody who is a good kid, somebody who is just a really good kid, to help them with their journey in college. And so the family started a scholarship fund for this purpose. And they hold a golf tournament every year in the young man's name. They have other fundraising and things. And so this co-worker of the father started this GoFundMe fundraising campaign. And it was a modest raise. I mean, I think it was because you put a limit on how much you want to raise, and I think it was like $5,000. So it wasn't a huge amount, but it was some. And there were all kinds of contributions that were made. Maybe not up to the $5,000, but they probably got pretty close. And we got a complaint from the family that said, you know, there was this fundraising campaign, and frankly, we really didn't know a lot about it. We didn't start it. We didn't authorize it or anything. And this person who raised the money, you can see how much was raised in total because the crowdfunding site kept a tally of how much money. And he said, the family came and said, we didn't get that much money. We got half of it or maybe less. So we undertook an investigation, and through the cooperation of the crowdfunding source, we were able to find out who made donations, how much was raised totally, what checks were cut to the person who started the fundraising campaign, and then we added up what was received by the scholarship fund with what was actually paid out by the crowdfunding organization to the fundraiser, and it was short by $1,800 or something. We ended up having to bring a case against the person and get a judgment against them and actually have to go and garnish their wages at their employer to get the money back. It was a good end to the story. We were able to recoup that money. And just as the sidelight, I have to give a shout out a little bit too, is it was GoFundMe, that was the organization. GoFundMe was so disappointed that this person had not contributed all of the funds over that they also made a donation, even though we were ultimately able to recover all or most of the funds. Maybe we didn't get maybe $50. They also got a contribution from GoFundMe to help offset what had been raised. So they made money in the end, but we had to do that. So I want to encourage all of the people out there that if you're going to make a contribution, find out who is the one that's behind it, make sure you know them and trust them, and then decide whether or not to make your campaign donation. Here are some things to consider in protecting yourself in making these charitable contributions. One is give yourself time. Get the literature. If somebody contacts you by phone or sees you in person, send something in the mail. Make sure you read the literature. See what they have. What do they do? What's their purpose? How do they fulfill their purpose? Some big warning signs are if you get contacted and ask you to contribute and they say to you, we'll have somebody over to your house in the next half an hour to pick up the contribution. That's an immediate red flag. You want to give yourself time to think about it. Pay the contribution by check. Make the check payable to the charitable organization. Do not make the check payable to an individual. Your check will be your receipt. If you are going to be able to deduct that from your taxes, you want a record of that. Paying cash to someone without getting a receipt and paying it to an individual is a sure recipe for disaster. Check and see and ask, if you get contacted about this, ask how much of your charitable contribution will actually go to the charitable purpose for which it's raised. Be wary of comments such as, all proceeds go to the charitable purpose. Because you understand that organizations do have expenses. And if it is a charitable organization, it's very unlikely that 100% of every penny you give is going to go toward that purpose. The legitimate organizations will give you that information. In addition to that, go to the Attorney General's website, charitiesnys.com, and look up the charity. Get the name of the charity, plug it in the charity registry, and go and look at their financial statements. Because if it's one of the larger ones and they have to file, everybody has to register, but those with above $25,000 have to report. Check and see how much. You can read their financial filings. You can read their tax returns. For the larger organizations, they have to actually file their 990, which is the federal tax return that's filed by charities. And you can look on it, and it will break down how much they've raised during the year, how much has been spent on overhead expenses, fundraising costs, and how much are going toward their charitable programs. Then you can make that informed decision. I'm not here to say, well, don't contribute to this organization or don't contribute to that organization because 90% of the money goes toward overhead expenses and things. That's your determination. Your determination to say, this is what I'm willing, this is the type of organization that I'm willing to contribute to. The important thing from our office's perspective is to assist you in getting that information. And if there's other ways, there's a entity called GuideStar that has information on charitable organizations. You can go check with them as well. And then you can make an informed decision. As long as you make the informed decision, you're doing the best that you can to help those people in need. Now, additionally, what I'd also like to talk to is to those of you, like me, who participate in not-for-profit organizations, charitable organizations, on boards, as volunteers, all those sorts of things. What a lot of times that people who join boards don't understand is being a board member is not just okay, I go to a meeting once a month or once every few months and I'm on the board. We, as board members, have a fiduciary obligation to that entity. It's more than just showing up and saying, okay, yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that. We have a fiduciary obligation to keep our eye on what's going on. Like a for-profit corporation, a not-for-profit corporation has a board of directors. It has officers. The officers, presidents, vice presidents, treasurers, secretaries, that sort of thing, are involved in more of the day-to-day operations. A lot of not-for-profit organizations hire an executive director that runs the day-to-day operations. The executive director answers to the board. It's incumbent upon the board to fulfill their fiduciary obligations of oversight of that executive director and those that work in the organization. Make sure that the funds are being used properly. Make sure that you get financial reports from the treasurer of the corporation and you look them over and that you understand them. As board meetings, there's usually a segment of time where the executive director does a report, the president does a report, the financial person, the treasurer, does a financial report. It's incumbent on us to keep eyes on what is going on. Another war story is I've recently had a case where the now former president of an organization was engaged in what's referred to as a related party transaction with the organization. It happens a lot. It happens a lot. Those of us that are engaged on boards, and when I was in private practice, I'd be on boards and they would ask for legal advice and I would be glad to give it to them because I was a member. I don't do that anymore because I'm with the Attorney General's office, but I would do that. So there's usually a lawyer on the board and there's usually a financial person on the board, and so that they come from all different types of professions and things that are come on the board. And we would have to look and make sure everything was going on well. Well, we have this complaint that there was this former president who was engaged in a undisclosed related party transaction. I'll tell you the scenario. The scenario was that the former president, who had only been a president for a very short period of time, months, was in the business of business consultancy. And he, as a part of his job, is that he would go into businesses and oversee their operation, to analyze their operations, to see if they're acting in an efficient manner, that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, and there's not a lot of waste and that sort of thing. And that was his business, and he was brought in. He volunteered first as a volunteer with the business, with the charity, and then they asked him to join the board, and then shortly after he joined the board, their president had resigned, so they wondered if he would be the president, and he agreed. And so as president, he kind of started to undertake a look at the charity to see, what its operations were like and stuff. And he said, I'm really busy in my own business, and I don't have time to do this completely. He says, I know this consultant who can come in, who does this for a living, that I can bring him in, and he can look, and he was from out of town. You bring him in, look, and it'll probably be the best estimate that we can say is probably be about $30,000 to look at the operations, look at the finances, cut down on the overhead expenses, things like that. So the board voted, and they said, sure, well, let's bring this guy and we'll pay. And the board, who are very committed, very nice people, but they just took their eye off the ball. So this was only a short contract of bringing this consultant in, and it was only going to be about a month or so. And he was going to get paid for his time and expenses and things. So they paid the first week, they paid the second week, they paid the third week, and then a bill was submitted that I think they expected it was going to be around $30,000. They had actually paid $36,000 and then received another bill for additional thousands of dollars. And the board said, whoa, wait a second, let's look into this. And as it turns out is that the former president had hired this consultant through his own business. So the consultant would give a bill to the former president. The former president would generate a bill from his company and submit it to the treasurer, finance person, and then the finance person would write a check. And then what would happen is the former president would then pay the consultant. What the board didn't realize was that the consultant was actually getting paid about $37 an hour for his time, plus expenses. The former president was billing the organization $295 an hour for that consultant's work. And when the complaint came into our office and we looked into it, we discovered that out of the $36,000, roughly, that the organization had paid for these consulting services, plus the total expenses, including the fees that the independent consultant charged, plus his travel expenses, plus his hotel expenses, stuff like that, that amounted to about $13,000. The business had gotten paid like $30-some thousand. So the profit to this former president was more than what the consultant who actually did the work was paid. The former president said, well, this is what we do. This is my business. Well, it turns out that there is actual law in New York that says when a charity is involved in a related party transaction, that'd be a key employee, an officer, a director of the organization, there has to be full disclosure to the board. In this case, there was not. With the exact terms of the deal. I mean, they could have agreed if he had disclosed to them, look, I'm paying this guy $36 an hour, plus expenses. I'm going to pay for some of the expenses myself. The hotel and stuff, I'll take care of. But I'm going to bill you $295 to cover all of this stuff. And the board looked at all of it and said, okay, if we did this through somebody else, it was going to be $350 an hour or whatever. They could have chosen to do. But it requires full disclosure of all the terms. The related party cannot participate in the discussions by the board, nor participate in the vote that the board takes. The board is required to go out and actually get other proposals from unrelated parties. And then when the vote is taken, they have to contemporaneously document in the minutes of the meeting all the circumstances surrounding this and why they're voting in favor of whatever option, which would be the related party transaction. These people did nothing about that sort of thing. And when we looked at it, the law allows the Attorney General's office, the Attorney General, to step in and actually void a transaction like this. What we ended up doing was voiding the transaction except to the actual out-of-pocket expenses that were paid. In other words, that $13,000 that went toward hotel expenses, travel expenses, and the actual payment to the consultant. And required the former president, who the board, once they found out about all this stuff and investigated, they fired him. And our office required that he reimburse to the charity any profits that he made over and above what those expenses were. And why I say that to you is those of you who participate in not-for-profit boards, you need to keep an eye on what's going on. Bigger contracts and things that come before the board, you need to understand all the terms. If it's a related party transaction, you have to document all of it. I'll use an example. Let's assume for the moment that it's a not-for-profit that has a building that they operate out of, and the building needs a new roof. And there happens to be a contractor on the board. And the contractor says, look it, I can do this roof. And I'll do it because I really believe in this mission. I'll do it for my cost. What is required is the board has to be given how much that's going to be. The board has to go out to other roofers and get estimates to have the work done, and then make their informed decision about, are we really getting this at cost or not? And then document what the decision is and why this option was chosen. And it's a question of transparency. Everybody has to know what's going on, and everybody has to vote on it. Because really, board members, you are breaching your fiduciary duty, can be held responsible if you do not exercise those fiduciary responsibilities. So you're not a rubber stamp. You're not a, oh yeah, that's fine, just go ahead and do it kind of deal. You have to understand what all the terms are, analyze it, make a decision, and vote appropriately. I will tell you that being a board member can involve a fair amount of time. It can, you get meeting minutes, you should review the minutes, make sure they're accurate. You should review the financial reports. You should insist on getting the financial reports ahead of time so that you can examine them. These big organizations, even big charities, it would be for-profit companies as well as charities, they have boards of directors. And you'll see, let's say a hospital system. That's a big outfit, not-for-profit outfit in a lot of instances. And they have boards of directors. And those boards of directors are usually pretty important people who really know what they're doing as far as operations of charities. Let's say if it's a hospital, the healthcare systems, finances, they know about finances, they have to understand about finances, they have to review financial reports, and be able to understand what they are, be conversant in them, and then make decisions based on that. They have meetings, usually it could be monthly, could be quarterly, could be a few hours. There's an agenda. They should know exactly what item is on there. And then actively participate. Actively participate in committees. There's compensation committees to evaluate whether the executive director should be paid a certain amount or whatever. There's finance committees. There's human resource committees. There's all kinds of different committees to participate in, and it's something that is an obligation, and we should undertake it seriously and fulfill those particular obligations. Those of you that are going to make contributions to these types of charitable causes, be good consumers. Evaluate what's going on. Make sure your dollars aren't being wasted. I know that we all have a finite amount of money that we can give for charitable causes. The best thing you can do is have a charitable giving program ahead of time. There are those of us that, we kind of make contributions to the organizations that we hold near and dear to our heart. I know my former educational schools that I went to that I'll contribute to, other charities that I'll contribute to for one reason or another. And I make those choices, and I make those choices ahead of time, and I know who I'm going to make contributions to, and I know how much I can afford to make and to give each year. And I encourage all of you to do the same, so that when you receive that telephone call from somebody that wants to raise money for something, one, you can look into it, And 2, you can say, well, it sounds like a really good purpose, and I might consider it in future years, but I've already made my determination as far as how much I'm giving and to whom this year. But if you want to send me your literature, in future years I'll consider whether or not I want to make a contribution in the past. Don't be forced into it. Give yourself time to think about it, and then I think you'll be quite comfortable in your choices that you make and who you donate to. If you have any questions related to charitable scams or things like that, you can contact me at the New York State Attorney General's office. You can contact our office. We're in Binghamton. Just look us up online, and you can get the number for the Binghamton Regional Office. We have consumer staff available to answer your questions related to this or any other consumer-related topic. If you want to file a complaint with our office, you can file a complaint. You can contact our office to get a complaint form, or you can actually go online and you can file your complaint online. It will ultimately, if it's in the Binghamton region, it'll ultimately get to our consumer staff there. We encourage all of you out there, those of you who join us and those of you that are out watching on TV, to come join us. We're here typically on the second Thursday of the month at 11 a.m. at 615 Willow Avenue in Ithaca at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Tompkins County's offices. We have a nice setting here, and we hope that at some point in time that we will see you. So again, thank you very much for attending, and hope that you have a good day and that you become a wise and good consumer. Thanks.